Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Dino. I first just want to say thank you. You know, we broke 4,000 subscribers the other day, and I'm extremely excited about that. And as I read through the comments, one of the most common comments that I get is, could you please do a video talking about all of the modifications that you've done to your Suzuki DR650 so far? Well, you're in luck, because today I not only have my DR650 here, but I have my friend Karl's DR650 as well. He's on a 2.5-week trip from Ontario all the way out to Newfoundland with his wife. So I told him to leave his bike here for security reasons, because if you remember, his bike was stolen about 1.5 years ago and recovered. So we can actually take a look at both mine and his, see what's similar and what are different about our two DR650s. So why don't you sit back, grab yourself something cold to drink, and enjoy Dino's Tinker Shed. I'm gonna go cut my front grass as well today, so I'll see you in a few minutes. Bye for now. All right, my grass looks really good, and I've got both of the DR650s sitting out here. The first thing probably many people ask is, why does the DR receive so many modifications? Why do people like to take these motorcycles and turn them into adventure bikes or full-on hardcore enduro bikes, or even super motard style motorcycles? I suppose the reason is the DR650 is a very simple platform, and anybody who rides one of these understands that. It's a basic steel frame, basic suspension, and the engine is about as reliable as a rock or a stick that you pick up on the ground. It's oil air cooled, it has a robust 5-speed manual transmission, service intervals are reasonably far apart, and the bike is in a very low state of tune when you buy one of these either new or unmodified as a used motorcycle. And they make a really good platform for many of the different styles of motorcycle that I've talked about already. The reason I bought one of these is I had come from a series of street bikes, mostly two-strokes, from even when I was a young kid. I had my motorcycle license before I had my car license, and I started riding things like RD350s, RZ350s, I had a TZR 250, a little bit of a Yamaha buff there, obviously, and I also had the chance to ride some of the wilder two-strokes, even though I didn't own them, things like the RZ500 or the absolutely amazing RG500 Gamma, which was a square 4-cylinder disc valve two-stroke street monster back in the mid 80s, like 86, 87. As I grew older, I kind of drifted out of motorcycles and then back into motorcycles, and what I found was most people were into Harleys, the cruiser style motorcycles, the last time I owned a street bike. So there was very few people that really wanted to ride with me. And on the other end of the Harley spectrum were the super bike riders, the people that were riding R1s or Hayabusas, things like that. And I'd become much more of a cautious rider as I got older. I liked the sport bike feeling, but I didn't want to ride at 250 or 280 kilometers an hour down the highways, risking life, limb, and most importantly, my license. So I actually got out of motorcycling for 4 or 5 years, got more heavily focused on snowmobiling, and you probably know that if you watch my channel at all. But about 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I started to get the itch to buy another motorcycle. And my friend Karl and I got talking and sort of said, you know what would be fun to buy is a dual sport motorcycle, something that we could toot around here, take the gravel roads, maybe some light trails, and do a little bit of exploring around the Niagara region. And I looked at a bunch of different motorcycles. I looked at Honda's 250s. I looked at some Yamahas, again, because I'm a Yamaha guy, like the XT660, things like that. But really, Karl was the one who said, you know what we should buy are DR650s. Now, Karl had owned 3 or 4 KLR 650s, which some people compare directly to the DR650. It's Kawasaki's version. And they were great bikes. What he didn't like about the KLR was it was somewhat more complex of an engine. Being liquid cooled, it had issues with this doohickey thingy. And he didn't really like the ride quality so much, especially off-road. He said it was a little bit heavier than he wanted and didn't really like it. We both did a little bit of research into the DR650 and realized that as a stock bike, it really is a 50-50 type motorcycle. It's comfortable on the highway and it's okay off-road. Doesn't do anything really well, but it does everything well enough that you can have fun on it. So both Karl and I started looking for DR650s, and believe it or not, we actually found a pair of DR650s. Both of them are 2009 models, and one's black and one's white, which was the 2 colors that were available in 2009. So we went out and bought these 2 bikes. His was local. I had to travel, I don't know, a couple 100 kilometers to get mine. And one of the things that I really wanted to do was I really wanted to take apart the engine and have a look up top. I've said this before, just to see how that valve train works. It was kind of a curiosity thing for me. And that's the nice thing about any motorcycle is oftentimes, not always, but often, it's your secondary vehicle. So you can actually take it apart and leave it apart in your shed or your garage while you use your primary vehicle to get to work or go get groceries and things like that. And it allows you time to learn how to fix it, how to repair it, how to service it yourself, which can be a really rewarding part of this hobby. Not long after we got these bikes, we really started talking about maybe traveling a little bit more on them. Karl, my friend, had done a lot of traveling on different motorcycles. He had like V-Stroms, again, 3 or 4 KLR 650s, he had Triumphs. He's had a long list of motorcycles, and he's taken those motorcycles all over the east coast of both Canada and the United States. And he wanted to do that with these bikes as well. As the DR sits, it's not the best adventure bike as a stock bike. So both of us set to work modifying it to sort of meet our needs. And this is probably the first thing that anybody should think about before they buy any motorcycle, and especially a DR650, is what is going to be your end goal for the motorcycle? Are you just going to ride it stock, maybe commute to work on it? Do you want to build a full-on adventure bike? Maybe something like what Karl and I have built, which is it's not, I wouldn't really call them adventure bikes, but they're a bit of a long-range touring bike. Do you want to have that off-road, high-performance, super suspended motorcycle with more horsepower? Or do you just want to basically ride a few dirt trails? The first thing before you modify any motorcycles, you need to have that thought process of where do I want to take this motorcycle as I move along. Like I said, Karl and I both share the same design philosophy for our DR650s. That is enough fuel range, so if we get up north in Ontario, where fuel isn't as abundant as it is down here in the south, we want more than the 13-liter factory tank. We wanted improved tires, which pretty much every DR owner wants. We really wanted to have some amenities, so power outlets, windscreen, eventually heated grips, things like that. And we wanted the bike to be as reliable as possible. So it starts well in cold weather, it runs rich enough that it's not leaning the bike out and sort of overheating it, those types of things. But neither of us are really interested in more than the 37 so horsepower that the DR produces. So we didn't really want to monkey too much with the internals or increasing fuel and exhaust flow to get 35 or 40 more horsepower, which you can't do, but to gain performance increases. That really wasn't important to us. So with that said, why don't we take a look at both of the motorcycles, and I'll show you the major differences between the two. They're not really that major, but also any of the upgrades that each of the two bikes has, and we'll go from there. Okay, let's take a look a little bit closer. I think it's fair to say that the most common question and the most common upgrade that I get questions about is my fuel tank, and Karl's the same way, although to a smaller extent. The factory DR650 has a 13-liter fuel tank, and it works great as just a general commuting all-around dual sport bike. In fact, off-road, I would venture to say the stock tank is a much better tank for any kind of tight trails. It makes the bike lighter, it's smaller in between your legs, and it's really designed well for its intended purpose, which is dual sport riding. Ride 20 or 30 kilometers on the road and then spend the day exploring trails or fire roads up in the mountains of Colorado or wherever. But when you start to use a DR650 as more of a long tour or an adventure bike, fuel range really does become the biggest constraint for these big singles. They don't get terrible gas mileage. I think I burn about 5 liters for every 100 kilometers that I ride, which isn't too bad considering it's a very old, outdated carbureted bike that doesn't have any of the advantages of modern day fuel injection and liquid cooling. Fortunately, because the bike has been around for so long and unchanged, there's 4 or 5 different manufacturers that make high quality aftermarket fuel tanks for the DR. I have a Safari tank on mine, which is made in Australia, and it holds 30 liters of fuel when you buy one of these brand new. Over time, the tank actually stretches and expands to hold around 35 liters according to some riders. If you start doing the math on that, you're getting hundreds of kilometers, 700-800 kilometers on a tank of fuel. And it really does make exploring backcountry roads in that far less stressful, because you know you've got a lot more fuel range than you can ride in a single day. Karl has an Italian fuel tank made by a Cherbis or a Cherbis, or I don't know, it starts with an A. His is a 20-liter tank, I believe. They make a 20 and a 25-liter. And I think if I was to do it again, I would probably go with a 20-liter tank like this. He still gets 300 or 350 kilometers on a tank of fuel with this. And believe me, when you're riding that long on a DR, you're gonna want to get off and stretch. And we don't ride into the most remote areas of Ontario, so we always have fuel available for us, especially like us, you monitor your mileage and you know the range of your motorcycle. When I bought my DR, my Safari tank came with the bike as a bit of an advantage or a bit of an upsell for me. The tank to buy is like $1,000 Canadian, and I only paid $3,200 for the motorcycle with this tank. So I just installed it on there, and it works really well for me. But again, it's a little bigger than I would need, and I think I would choose what Karl has here, or one of the other manufacturers that make a slightly smaller tank like this. One of the challenges I have is I'm not able to mount those lights like Karl has on the front. I'd love to put some driving lights on the front of this bike, but because of these large sort of winged canisters that extend ahead of the fuel tank, or ahead of the head tube actually, it makes installing these lights virtually impossible unless I just mount a single 4 or 6 inch bar down on the fender itself, which I may do someday. I can't stress enough how nice it is to have additional fuel range though when you are riding. And the advantage of this safari tank that they don't really advertise is because it's so big, it acts like a bit of a fairing and keeps your legs warm on the highway. And the Safari does come with 2 petcocks, not one like this Acerbis here, which allows you to do some fuel management if you want. The biggest disadvantage I find with my tank especially, and Karl's to a lesser degree, is that it makes servicing a lot more difficult. I really cannot get my spark plugs out to check them on here if I want to. And even routing the fuel lines was much harder on my Safari than it was on Karl's Acerbis because his tank sits a little bit higher. Mine, I had to actually turn or I didn't, but whoever owned it before me actually had to turn the intake port on the carburetor to allow the fuel lines to work properly with this tank. There's much more involved with a Safari than an Acerbis, so I think I would probably stick with something like this, but that's just me ranting more than anything. Both are great tanks, both have good advantages, and if you're planning on doing any kind of long haul riding, you're probably going to be shopping for one of these sometime in your future. I did a video a while back on how to update your turn signals to LED turn signals, and my tail light also has one. You should be able to see it if I turn it on here. You can see the turn signals. They're quite bright, they work well, and they give you a lot more visibility out there for oncoming traffic. It's not a hard upgrade. It involves purchasing some LED bulbs, a new relay under the seat here, and there's a pigtail that fits up on the front with some diodes in it that allows any kind of LED bulb to work with its standard DR650 wiring. Inexpensive, great upgrade, and it goes along really well with my Cyclops front headlight that I upgraded almost immediately. The Cyclops H4 bulb, and I got the Ultra, really is a vast improvement over the stock halogen bulb that Karl still has in his bike. It provides much better nighttime riding, but really for me, what I'm more impressed with is the visibility of the bike to oncoming traffic. It is like a lightning bolt up front there. It really does provide a nice clean white light that oncoming traffic can see and in turn see you. Great upgrade, about $80. I'd highly recommend that to anybody that wants to improve the lighting of a stock DR650. Because Karl doesn't use an LED bulb, he has the factory bulb in his bike, as I said earlier. He actually mounted some LED spotlights here on the front of his bike using a bracket that a friend of ours, Bill Hamilton, made for us. It mounts the bike lights out nicely ahead of the main light, and these small 4 or 5 watt LEDs really do a good job of providing visibility for oncoming traffic to see Karl, and at night they really do light up the front of his bike really, really well. It's an inexpensive upgrade that most DR owners can use. Unfortunately, because of the size of my Safari tank, the bracket that Bill made me won't fit. It actually touches the wings of the tank as they sit up front. But Bill, if you're watching, thanks again. Karl uses these all the time. On a factory DR650, there really is not a lot of storage options for anything, really. There's a factory toolbox that just holds the factory tool roll inside of it, but there's really not much room for anything else. There's no under seat storage. There's nothing like that on a DR650. Oftentimes, because of this, owners will either add racking, add boxes, they'll increase the size of the toolbox, and I've done most of those things. You can see here that I have just a cheap Amazon luggage rack bolted to the back, and Karl has the same one on his bike. It's a little bit easier to see on his. I'll put a picture here so you can see it, and maybe I'll include a picture from Amazon. I think I paid about $80 or $82 Canadian when I bought mine a number of years ago. It's about 1/4 inch thick aluminum, not quite, it's not quite that thick. And I'm sure that under really, really heavy riding, pounding, or really heavy luggage, this rack isn't going to stand up the same way a tubular rack of higher quality would. However, combined with this inexpensive luggage box that I bought from Princess Auto for $14, and my welding toolbox, the welding tube toolbox that I put on down below here, it gives me adequate daily storage for when I'm riding. It stores the tools and tire irons and things that I need here. And this has lasted 2 years now, this toolbox, including longer distance trips of 2,000-3,000 kilometers where I've loaded my camping gear up here, my clothing, everything else, and strap it down with these rock straps. This has done me very well. However, Karl has a much more robust Pelican style toolbox mounted to his luggage rack. And I think if I was going to do it again, I would probably spend the extra money. I think it was about $50 Canadian or $55 Canadian on sale. It's a much more robust and durable toolbox or luggage box, but still isn't so big that it is sort of cumbersome when you're riding. So these are a great option to have on any DR, and this one I've just mounted with some rivet nuts to the actual luggage frame here, so I can take this off anytime that I want. And inside of this box, I've compartmentalized it using foam floor tiles, the ones you get for kids' playrooms that look like expanded aluminum, but they're really made out of foam. I've trimmed and hot glued all kinds of different segments inside of my toolbox here to hold things like my air compressor, my bike jack, my camp stove fits in here, and then when I'm not needing the camp stove and whatnot, I do have some daily storage that is somewhat useful when I'm out riding. This is a good upgrade, something that I've used every time I ride, and it's something most DR650 owners would probably benefit from if they're going to use the bike for any kind of travel. An item that I find extremely useful, and I often forget to mention, are these rock straps here. Now, I don't know if these are available all over the place, but they combine an adjustable ladder lock webbing strap with a high strength bungee cord on the other end. These are super adjustable, they're super strong, they have looped eyelets on either end so you can rope them around all over the place, and they're a super flexible attachment device that you can get for your motorcycle or snowmobile or Sea-Doo even if you wanted. They come in different widths, so if you need lots of securement, you can get the wider variety. These ones here are about 15 millimeters wide, and they provide a very large loop that you can just quickly attach, cinch down, and they work fantastically for securing your luggage. I carry an extra set inside as well that I can loop this way if I've got extra bulky items. They work fantastic, and they work really good in conjunction with my $14 storage box here on the back of my bike. From the factory, the mirrors that are on the Suzuki are kind of tight. They're really actually pretty close, and someone like myself with a little bit bigger upper body frame, I guess I can't say it any way, I'm fat. With my riding coat on and some gear, the mirrors tend to be a little bit too close together to really see around your shoulder. And you do a lot of this to kind of look and see who's behind you. A while ago, I built some homemade mirror extenders, these things right here. These move both of the mirrors out 2 inches from the center of the motorcycle. and really do make it much easier to see in behind you. There's a lot of aftermarket components out there. There's a lot of adventure mirrors that you can buy. What's it, double take mirrors are very popular that use a ram mount, and those allow you to actually fold the mirrors in when you're off-road. These do stick out quite a bit, so if you're off-road and you hit something, you're going to end up either damaging your mirror, or at the very worst, you're going to move it out of place. But these are a good option for highway riding, and I use them all the time. I made a set for Karl as well. These are available if you search them on Amazon, and they're not expensive. They're probably $20 or $30 now, I would think. Makes it easy for you to get a little bit better visibility in behind the bike. Maybe one of the biggest or possibly smallest differences between Karl's bike and my bike is the fact Karl's bike is lowered, and you may be able to actually see it in this comparison. His seat height is about 2 inches lower than my DR650. Many other bikes use aftermarket components to actually lower their motorcycles to gain a wider range of rider heights. The DR650 has provisions right from the factory to be able to lower the bike to the seat height that Karl has here. It's not terribly difficult. It involves taking your front forks apart, reversing a spacer that's in there to lower the front forks, and at the back you need to move the bottom pivot bolt on the shock to lower the seat height at the back. But in the end, like I said, you gain about 2 inches of lowered seat height for riders who maybe don't have quite as long of inseam, or maybe aren't as comfortable with the bike being at its stock ride height. Karl is by no means short, and he's definitely not a timid rider. However, the 2 inches lower on the seat for him just makes the bike feel a little more comfortable and actually makes it a little more nimble feeling for him when he's riding off-road. So it was a good move for him. One thing that my bike does have that Karl's doesn't is I have my foot pegs lowered. So why don't we take a look at that? Of course, this is the first video that I made in weeks, and now it's going to start raining. So I'm going to put stuff back in the shed, and I might need to come back and make the rest of the video another time, or maybe in the shed, I don't know. But I got to get these bikes back in and get my camera equipment out of the rain. Oh boy, what a pig. Bush pig. I just managed to beat the rain. It's actually raining pretty good out there right now, so I'll probably have to get some pickup shots later. However, as I was talking about, the previous owner to my DR650 was a pretty tall chap. He was about 6'3" probably, so he had about 4 inches on me. And one of the things that even sort of average size riders do talk about is the distance between the foot peg and the seat on the factory DR can be a little bit tight for longer rides. It sort of pushes your legs up a little more than most riders like. Tall riders like the previous owner, or even myself that's close to 6 feet tall, do like to lower the foot pegs, and this bike has a nice lowering kit already installed. It gives a little bit more room in the cockpit, and this particular adaptation here moves the foot pegs back about, I'm going to say 25-30 millimeters, about an inch and a half rearward as well, giving more room between the foot peg and the actual foot controls. The other thing this particular kit does is it removes the rubber isolating bushings from the foot pegs. Karl's bike has the foot pegs in the stock location with the rubber foot mounts. They do take away a lot of the engine vibration as you ride. However, many DR650 owners complain that it makes a bit of a mushy feel to the foot pegs, and many choose to remove them, such as these ones here. I do notice a lot more buzzing through my foot pegs than when I ride Karl's bike occasionally. So you really need to think about whether or not you want to do that. If you primarily ride off-road, you use this bike more for a trail bike, it's probably a good idea. It gives you more control over the motorcycle. But if you're like me that rides a lot on the highway, leaving the rubber isolators in place is probably a good idea. While we're in here, I'll talk a little bit about these case savers that I installed recently on a video. I did talk in that video about how the cases, the case covers on the DR650 are somewhat weak, made out of a magnesium aluminum blend. Many riders have found that when you crash, and if you're riding off-road and even on-road, you're most likely someday are gonna lay the bike down. Either the brake or the shifter can actually punch a hole through the case covers. Installing a case saver like this can really get you out of a pinch if you're off-road somewhere and do happen to fall. I have a fairly generic brand that I bought on Amazon. I think they're around $45 or $50 maybe for these. Karl has a very high quality set of stainless steel case protectors. In fact, I think his might be the originals. There's some advantages to buying the originals. They're a little bit thinner because they're stainless steel, and oftentimes they're made in the USA. In fact, when I did my video on this, the person who originally designed these contacted me and said that the aluminum ones like this that are coming out of Japan, he can't even make them for the same price as they're selling them on Amazon, and he's suffering quite a bit for that. So maybe something you want to think about to support your local tradespeople who are making these things and being innovative, unlike myself that bought them off Amazon to save a bit of cash. But these are a good option, and both Karl and I run them. I have several modifications to the front of my DR650. Some of this you can buy, but most of it I've either made or modified. The first thing I get a lot of questions about is my windscreen. What type of windscreen do I have on my DR? Well, like the Safari tank, when I bought my DR650, I got this windscreen with it. Both the tank and the windscreen were not mounted to the motorcycle. They were just given to me as extras. There were some holes drilled in the fairing, and I thought, oh, it must just bolt up. Well, I didn't realize it at first, but Karl pointed out to me that right on the front here, on the fairing itself or on the windscreen, it actually has a mark on there for BMW. And as I did more research, I realized that this fairing is most likely off of a 650 Dakar dual sport BMW. And you can buy these aftermarket if you do like the look of it. I had to make all of the mounting brackets to make this thing fit. It wasn't terribly hard, and I do have a video on how to do that, or how I did it anyway. Overall, the windscreen provides very good protection. This little flip at the top here sort of splits the wind, and I don't tend to get a lot of helmet buffeting, but it's not so big that it stops all the wind flow. The only disadvantage that I find with this particular windscreen is it's so thick that it's kind of heavy, and because I made my mounts out of steel, it adds a fair amount of weight to this front sort of fly screen that comes with the DR650 stock. When Karl was looking for a windscreen, he shopped around and he ended up finally buying a Parabellum windscreen that we mounted on his motorcycle, and I have a video on how we did that as well. Now, since we did that, Karl wanted to raise that windscreen just a little bit because he did find it buffeted his helmet a little bit. So we made some brackets that fit on the side of the windscreen and raised the Parabellum up about 2 inches. And it sort of brings it up in the same height level as what I have here. In behind, I have just a standard Garmin GPS on there. It's nothing fancy. And I have this little sort of, I don't know if I can get it off of here, little sunscreen that fits over top to let you see a little bit better. I bought that on Amazon for $14, and believe me, it's not worth $14. It's broken a couple times. I fixed it with some JB Weld, but it does provide coverage from the sun and allows me to see the GPS a little clearer. Probably the biggest upgrade that I have to this motorcycle is the custom-built dash that holds my fairing out from the motorcycle's handlebars and provides room for USB connectors, 12-volt connectors, and a supplementary power supply that's underneath the dash itself. And I get a lot of requests for this particular design. Do I have it on paper? And I have it on CAD now so that you can print it out in 3D printing. And I'm just working through the bugs now with a friend of mine. I've just about got it to the point where it all fits together really well. I've got one piece that I have to modify a little bit. He'll reprint that for me. And I think we're going to try it on Karl's bike to see if it's actually strong enough to work instead of making this out of aluminum the way that I did it. I'll do a video on that once I get that finished. It's just been taking me such a long time, and I feel like a bit of an idiot. It's taken this long, but I've really just been focusing on trying to get my truck driving license, my heavy equipment tickets and that, so I have not been spending as much time doing videos and working on secondary projects like that dash. But it is close to being done, to be shareable, and you'd be able to print out your own dash like this. So those are pretty much the major upgrades that I've done to my bike and Karl's done to his. The motors on both of these are stock. I did jet mine, rejet it, not for performance, but really just to make it start a little better and idle a little smoother in colder weather. And I did that just by using the ProCycle Jet Kit. I have a link to that, or I have a video to that anyway that you can search. And of course the tires, Karl went with some K60s on his bike, and I have some Shinko 705s. The tires that come with these, obviously everybody complains about them, so tires are so subjective. It's really something that you're going to need to figure out what style of tire you need, what aggression level you want, and what brand that you're comfortable with. And I know Karl loves those Heidenhaus K60s. I think they're a great looking tire, and I've ridden his bike. They feel really, really good. These 705s that I have are reasonably good tires, but I just personally don't like the feel of them, which means that once I burn these off, I'll probably try something else. It might be another Shinko tire, but this particular tread pattern just doesn't seem to really inspire confidence with me. And of course I have a small tank bag on here that I have a video on how I modified that. But primarily that's the modifications that I've done to my bike and what Karl's done to his. And I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I know it's not a really detailed video here, just kind of walks you around what I've done to my motorcycle, what Karl's done to his. But if you have liked it, please consider subscribing, liking the video. It really does help this channel grow and helps me to sort of bring content to other people who maybe don't know the channel exists. So until then, I'm Dino. I hope you have yourself a great day, and I really hope that you tinker easy. Bye for now.